Welcome back. You're watching World News and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwinska. European leaders are in Brussels today for talks focusing on supporting Ukraine and how to finance the continent's military ramp-up by 2030. According to leaked conclusions seen by TVP World, this acceleration needs to be seen as a matter of urgency, with some prime ministers floating joint borrowing as a financial lever. Our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, reports from the Belgian capital.
Financing Europe's defence ramp-up sits at the core of high-level discussions in the Belgian capital on Thursday. Now, the 27 leaders from across the European Union are here for a European Council with support for Ukraine, Europe's defensiveness as well as competitiveness at the top of that agenda. We got an update here on that rearm Europe plan. This is Europe's €800 billion proposal to get the continent ready for any threats that come its way by the end of the decade. We've heard from a senior European Commission official that intelligence reports suggest that Russia could attack in the next 3 to 5 years, which demonstrates just how urgent these talks are. Let's take a listen to what the EU High Representative Kaja Kallas said about the importance of these talks today, particularly ongoing support for Ukraine.
For Ukraine, I've proposed initiative to really go with the ones that President Zelensky needs. Ammunition in amount of 5 billion. So we should at least start to have a really concrete step, not only words, but also in deeds, that we are helping Ukraine right now. Because the stronger they are on the battlefield, the stronger they are behind the negotiation table. And of course, today we're going to also discuss competitiveness, because it goes hand in hand as well. Our economy is doing. The means from economy also help us to do all the things we have to do, meaning investing more in defense, also helping Ukraine. So this is also a very, very important discussion.
Now, while countries can tap into that €150 billion investment package, which is exempt from value-added taxes, more questions remain about how those member states are expected to drum up that remaining €650 billion required to get the continent ready for those military threats. We've heard common borrowing and debt bonds as well floated by a number of leaders here in the Belgian capital. We know that the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis called for grants to be distributed instead of loans. This was echoed by the Latvian Prime Minister, but refuted by the leader of the Netherlands. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out of these high-level talks here in the Belgian capital today regarding these very important issues. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Roberta Metsola spoke to journalists before today's European Council meeting in Brussels. In her brief statement, Metsola had one primary message: Europe is open for business.
We need to be stronger, our citizens need to feel safer, and we need to make things simpler. How do we make our citizens feel safer? First of all, we need to send the clearest of messages on Ukraine, on where we spend, how we put our money where our mouth is, how we do not let go of the principles that we laid out as to what peace means in Europe already 3 years ago. To do that, we need a strong economy. How do we strengthen our economy? By making sure and sending the clearest of messages that Europe is open for business, that access to capital is easier. This is up to us. We have the tools, we just now have to do it. Thirdly, we need to make things simpler. In the European Parliament, we are negotiating and starting the debate already on the multi-annual financial framework. How do citizens want to see that our funds are used? And those funds, as they will be used in the next few years, will be the ones that will determine the direction that the European Union will take.
Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda announced that his country has proposed to set an orientation date of Ukraine's possible accession to the EU by January 1st, 2030. He also stressed the importance of using time bought by the Ukrainians on the battlefield to rearm Europe.
Lithuania proposes to set the orientation date of possible membership of Ukraine in the European Union 2030, January 1st. It would encourage our friends Ukrainians to proceed faster because I know their ability to implement all the necessary reforms, even under very complicated circumstances during the war. Of course, it's important to use this precious time Ukraine is buying for us in order to strengthen our military capabilities, and I welcome European Commission's proposal, rearm Europe. We have to rearm ourselves, because otherwise we will be the next victim of Russian aggression.
On Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky commented on his phone call with his American counterpart. According to Zelensky, the two officials discussed the U.S. potentially taking control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and conditions for a ceasefire.
There was a question about the nuclear power plant. There was no question about the network of nuclear power plants. We spoke exclusively about the plant that is under temporary occupation. It is in danger because Russia is controlling it with weapons, and it's not working because Russia has absolutely illegally held it and occupied it. President Trump asked me if there was a possibility that America could rebuild it, and I told him yes, if we can modernize it, invest money and so on, we are ready to discuss it with you. But we only talked about one plant, which is under Russian occupation. Vladimir Putin doesn't want us to leave even one of our soldiers in the Kursk region. He doesn't want a ceasefire as long as our troops are in the Kursk region. I am absolutely sure of this. Putin has been telling everyone all these years that Ukraine does not want the war to end, that Ukraine is disrupting a potential ceasefire, that Ukraine is the one not wanting this war to end. What Ukraine has demonstrated today is that Ukraine wants the war to end. Ukraine is stronger than he thinks, that Ukraine is ready for a full ceasefire without any conditions.
The spokesperson for the U.S. State Department, Tammy Bruce, said that control of Ukraine's power plants by U.S. entities would be enough to deter Russia from attacking the country again.
That comes from President Trump, who is one of the best businessmen we think has ever been around, and he knows how to make deals. And there's a serious consideration, in fact, that if you have an American-owned entity via a company, perhaps not certainly the government necessarily, that creates, I think the presumption is that it creates a deterrent to strike, that you have also an economic partnership that increases the economic viability of a nation, the general certainly infrastructure stability of a nation. When you have people running your infrastructure, or in a particular part of the infrastructure, who know what they're doing, and that maintains not just the economic framework, but also a security framework because of the nature and the need for energy.
Russia has launched another series of attacks on Ukraine, killing at least one person and injuring 11 more, including several children. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have conducted their biggest drone strike on Russia's Saratov region yet.
A man was killed and one more person wounded when a Russian rocket targeted a town in Ukraine's Donetsk region. 7 residential buildings were also damaged in the attack. Meanwhile, 10 more people, including 4 children, were injured in a Russian drone attack on the Kirovohrad region.
The explosion was strong. The windows shattered instantly and the chandeliers fell. Everyone survived, but it was deafening. We haven't heard anything like this since the war began.
Private houses were attacked the most. Windows were smashed and roofs were damaged. No one was killed, but 8 people sought medical treatment. 3 were hospitalized, and 1, in a serious condition, was transported to the hospital.
Meanwhile, Kiev's UAV attack targeted Russia's Engels Air Force Base, home to long-range strategic bombers used in the Russian strikes on Ukraine. Footage shared by local residents shows flames and smoke rising above the airfield. This exchange comes just days after US President Donald Trump spoke to both Russia's Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, aiming to secure a ceasefire.
An investigation has been launched in Slovakia, where 5 people, including 4 young children, were killed when fire tore through 8 homes in the east of the country. The mayor of Veliki Šariš, around 300 kilometers northeast of the capital Bratislava, posted on Facebook that around 30 people were affected by the blaze. 11 adults and 7 children were offered shelter in a local community center where they were given food and clothing. Local firefighters said on Facebook that rescue workers were called out at around 10:30 p.m. local time on Wednesday night. Major protests have erupted in Turkey after authorities detained Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul and biggest political rival of the Turkish president. Turkish law enforcement arrested the politician on Wednesday, just days before İmamoğlu was due to be tapped as a presidential candidate. Protesters have taken to the streets, as you can see in our live feed, with crowds chanting anti-government slogans in a display of anger Turkey has not seen in years. As the demonstrations continued, reports surfaced of clashes between protesters and police, which used pepper spray to disperse crowds outside the Istanbul University. Prosecutors accused the mayor of Istanbul of corruption and aiding a terrorist group, calling him the leader of a criminal organization. As part of the investigation, the police also detained 100 people, including politicians, journalists, and entrepreneurs. And just as I mentioned before, the live feed that you can see on your screens this very moment is a live feed of the protests currently taking place in Istanbul. And with that latest news from Turkey, we end our service, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment here on TVP World with more news and features, and we'll see you there.